Lots of different conversation going on about alternative means to send our kids to schools. We'll talk about it tonight. Welcome into My State of Mind. I am Dan York. We got a lot to cover, so we put this program together every late afternoon for your 7:30 and 11:30 viewing pleasure. And I cannot believe the snow that's on the ground out there. It's almost as if the DPW and the DOT gave up today. Just went, you know, it's just 3, 5, 6 inches, and people are sliding all over the place. It's not, you're not allowed to actually take care of the roads in March, or anyway, it's my frustration, just like you, spilling over. There will be a spring. Right now, it's just a rumor. Let's get to the rundown and see if we can cover a couple of things. I cannot believe this headline today in the Providence Journal, and the overall tone that there was a surprise. I'll explain. Makes sense to me, but a couple of things you got to know about Newport Grand and Twin River. The federal trial of Mr. Tsarnaev is now in day 2, and boy, oh boy, oh boy. I mean, we know inevitably what's going to happen there, don't we? What else do we have here on a rundown today? Yeah, this Curt Schilling story is just way out of control. He charges all the younger generation with not being grounded. He ought to check himself at the door. And hey, Bryant with a big win last night, keeping the college basketball excitement going here. And of course, your state of mind is important to us, and we shall check in with you on it. As we switch back to our main camera, let us go down the rundown as Kevin throws these items up on my screen. Surprise? How? Why? Really? Yeah? You think? Here it is. Fox actions uncovered almost by accident. I'm thinking, look, all due respect to the feds who brought this case for the most part, this guy, Gordon Fox, Mr. Droopy, sorry, this thief, the former House Speaker, jammed up by the next guy here, who's Peter Neronha, the U.S. attorney, who had his press conference on Tuesday and brought all the good news, I guess, of yet another politician gone down. The idea that the feds kind of fell upon this, right, that they were investigating this Providence Economic Development Partnership thing. The U.S. attorney, by the way, didn't admit that in the press conference, but the source work in the paper, Tom Mooney in the Journal and others, everybody knows. We talked about it last night with Dan McGowan. The Providence Economic Development Partnership investigation led these guys to this investigation. All you had to do was kind of snoop around the social environment of the state representatives in the General Assembly, and they would have told you that Gordon Fox was playing around with his campaign money. I told people on the radio it for a couple of years. So he was toxic well before he was charged. So I'm surprised that the feds were surprised. But in the end, they got him anyway, I guess. It's weird, isn't it? The whole thing's weird. And you know what? It's actually a fringe situation right now, because Gordon was involved at 38 Studios. Gordon's involved in a whole bunch more stuff here that's much more meaty for the public consumption and for justice. So stay tuned. By the way, the House Speaker and the Majority Leader today put out a press release. They want to put a law together, lickety-split, that will mandate that politicians now send a bank statement along with their quarterly statement on campaign finance, totals, the money they have, the money in, the money out. See, the problem here for Gordon Fox is that he said he had about $212,000 in his campaign account. Truth is, he only had 50, because he was spending it, but he didn't want anybody to be alerted to the big drop in his campaign expenses, so he would lie about it. Now they want to have a bank statement to go along with. Well, that's a good idea, but that only touches the surface, and the Speaker knows it. What we ought to do is eliminate all of the fine dining of the legislators. That would eliminate the need for probably 70% of the campaign funds. And we should stop the check passing that goes on back and forth. My account sends to your account, this reps at this fundraiser. Raising money to give it away to other reps, it's like a bad Vermont economy. You know how they just trade stuff back and forth between flea markets? That's how the politicians do business here. Eliminate those two things and we'll start to clean it up. Who's going to call for that? Maybe the governor will. Oh no, she's kind of hiding right now. Gambling merger. Yes. This was inevitable, right? Twin River makes play for Newport Grand. A little bit of information on how that went down.
With bordering Massachusetts set to open casinos soon, Twin River thinks this was a necessary purchase.
I believe we are the right company at the right time to give Newport Grand a fighting chance to survive against the coming onslaught of Massachusetts casinos.
Twin River recently won approval from local and state voters to open table games at their casino, but Newport voters time and time again have rejected expanding the slot casino onto the table. Liz Tabor, with citizens concerned about casino gambling, says they hope Twin River keeps its promise to keep cards off tables.
We just want to be assured that it's not a toxic element that has a negative effect on the local economy and the other local businesses that have to compete.
Well, Liz, I hate to break it to you, but yeah, Mr. Taylor and others will most likely come back to you for table games, even though they'll tell you no, even though it'll probably be in writing no. Same thing for the hotel. They didn't need a hotel at Twin River, but yes, now they do. And they'll need table games for survival 3, 4, 5, 7 years down the line. Count on it. And that's just the way it goes in the gambling business. They take a little, and then they grab a yard later. It's just the way they survive. There's hardly anything you can do about it. It's like the snow in March. There's just not much you can do about it. The guy who wins, of course, is this smiling guy, Joe Paolino, developer, former mayor of the city of Providence, got himself in the middle of this Newport conversation, had a contract once again to buy Newport Grand, and was bought out by Twin River. The rich get richer. It's a good thing in America. Next item, going through the motions. That's what it feels like, doesn't it, when you take a look at this headline? Mr. Tsarnaev is now, being tried, day 2, and all these victims have been moved in, and stories are being told, and the pain's all being relived, as CBS reports.
Heavy intrigue at a very busy Boston federal court Wednesday after a jury selection process that dragged on for 2 months, opening statements and the start of testimony in United States versus Dzhokhar Tsarnaev. A delegation of family members of the deceased, of the wounded, and the survivors themselves present nearly 2 years after the attack. Lead prosecutor Bill Weinreb delivered a powerful opening. The defendant wasn't there to watch that race. Weinreb said to the panel of 10 women and 8 men, he had a backpack over his shoulder, and in the backpack was a homemade bomb.
That's actually Jared Pliner from the CBS affiliate, WPRI 12. I'm sure there's all sorts of great work being done, both by the defense and the prosecutors here. But this is a waste of time. It's a waste of money, and it's a total drain of energy for the victims, who may have convinced themselves that they want to go through this whole thing, but this kid doesn't care. The defense is going to do an adequate enough job of putting the thought in the minds of the jury that his brother influenced him, and they won't send him to the death penalty, which is why they should have settled this case for life in prison, throw away the key, and let's move on. Instead, we're going to highlight the terrorist. We're going to go through all the motions. We're going to spend millions and millions of taxpayer money. We're going to soak everyone's psyche and come up with the same result we could do right now. We just said, no mas. Doesn't make sense to me. Twitter attacks, yeah, Curt Schilling, I mean, this guy is a caricature of himself, it seems to me. The big headline now for Curt is that his daughter was, he says, victimized by a lot of real bad tweets about her after he began a conversation with some respondents who responded to his original message, which was about his daughter getting a scholarship at Salve Regina. Here's the latest.
There's an enormous gap between this generation and accountability.
It started last week when he posted a harmless tweet congratulating his daughter on being accepted to Salve Regina University, where she'll play softball. The responses were cordial at first, then came the vulgarity.
I have never in my life said some of the things that these guys said. Never.
So Schilling responded by identifying 2 of the men who sent the most offensive tweets on his personal website. One of them worked for the New York Yankees as a part-time ticket seller and was fired.
This is my child. You attacked my child.
Oh, please. By the way, you don't get a scholarship to Salve, Division III program, my bad. He announced that she's going to pitch for them. Well, good for her. Why did he have to announce it on Twitter anyway? There's no excuse for the awful things that were written. And, you know, everyone's applauding Curt Schilling like he's some kind of big tough guy going out there and fighting for his daughter. Why do you exploit your family on Twitter in the first place? I got a good idea. Shut up about your family. Make a phone call to other family members and friends if you got good news about your daughter. That's what people used to do in the old days, and it's actually still applicable today. The people who care want to know. The rest don't. And you put yourself and your family out there, Curt, ding dong. Bryant hangs on. Look at this action. This to force it to the first overtime last night with Mr. O'Shea making a tough shot.
It felt good, to be honest. Probably it's hard to believe because I was falling down, but it did feel good. And then I thought it might be a little short, but then I saw it switch through the net, and I was like, we're going to overtime. But we've had really good regular seasons the last 3 years, but we haven't been able to get it done in the tournament. So to get a win like that, especially with that much excitement, it's pretty cool.
I guess you tell the guy to like hit you on the shoulder so you don't make sure your nose doesn't get hurt. Got that whole nose guard thing going on. Great stuff, double overtime. So Bryant remains in the Northeast Conference playoffs. Congratulations to them. We still have a shot for 3 to make the big show, the NCAA. URI probably won't make it unless they win the tournament, so they got a lot of work to do, but PC's in. It's still a great time of year. High school basketball, by the way, is exciting right now, and coming up this Sunday, we'll have the quarterfinals on WPRO. My company produces the games, and I hope that you tune in and listen to all the action. State of mind, yes. Voicemails, emails, tweets, Facebook posts, you can do that. Keep it clean. Here's Steve.
I hear he's going to get 3 years. 3 years? He should get 30 years. He's a crook. He's no good. All right? They knew this a year ago. Obviously, they got to go through the judicial system and do what you got to do. But as far as I'm concerned, 3 years is nothing.
Yeah, well, that's about Gordon Fox, right? The Speaker of the House and the deal they made. My guess is 3 years is something if he's tweeting like a bird. And my guess is tweet, tweet. A new way to fund schools and offer choice. Next. All right, this is the one that grabbed all the headlines, at least. It's not the one we're talking about, though, which is why I don't want you to be confused. Can we fire that up? Sure we can. Sure we can. There we go. Supporters rally for charter schools. There are hundreds of kids that were at the State House and a whole bunch of folks, including Lieutenant Governor Dan McKee, talking about charter schools. There's worry that there's going to be some messing around in the General Assembly for the funding of charter schools. But simultaneous with that, the Center for Freedom and Prosperity and Mike Stenhouse were presenting their ideas for new legislation. Welcome aboard again. Nice to see you.
Good to see you, Dan.
And Luis Vargas is here. He is a coalition member, ran for state representative, lost to Joe Almeida, which means he's got a pipeline to the General Assembly in the next go-around, and a school choice advocate. Welcome.
Welcome. Good to be here.
Nice to have you. You're involved in this. Why?
I am actually a product of school choice myself.
Where?
I went to Gilbert Stewart Middle School in Providence for public school, and I was taken out of there during my 7th year in middle school to go to private school. And I went to Trinity Christian Academy in Johnston and Dayspring Christian Academy in South Attleboro.
Okay. And how'd you pay for that?
My mom and dad were not college educated. My dad's a truck driver. My mom is a medical assistant. And when they came to this country, they were originally from Puerto Rico. They worked 60 hours a week. My dad took trips to Virginia and back. I wouldn't see him for days. But they made that sacrifice to bring me to private school and get me the education that they thought I deserved. And it was that first year out of public school in the private school system that I was introduced to a mock trial program, which is just I would act like an attorney in front of real judges and real attorneys. And it was since that year, and I was horrible at it, but I loved every second of it. And since then, that's been my passion. I went to Roger Williams University and studied legal studies and political science. Ran for General Assembly last year and plan to go to law school in the near future.
All right. Well, that's a great summary. And obviously, you've learned well, because nice presentation, no doubt. Your point again is, well, and the legislation calls for?
Well, the legislation calls for a form of school voucher. We call it Education Savings Account. It's an evolved form. We can get into the mechanics later. But Ray Hull, who's also a minority from Providence in the General Assembly, is the lead sponsor in the House, and he told a similar story, how his life was transformed because somebody sponsored him to go to a private school. And the point we're trying to make here is that for guys like Lewis and Representative Hull, if you're in a school system that just isn't going to meet your standards or your needs, why should you have to stay there? In their case, they were lucky enough that somebody put them through private school. What Ray Hull said yesterday is, so this scholarship program, without harming public school districts, will give more and more low-income families the same opportunities we had.
Well, look, I mean, if you can prove that the numbers work, a lot of people will probably be with you. So it's really going to be about the numbers. On the charter schools and the big event that they had there yesterday, your policy position on charter schools alone is what?
Well, charter schools are one form of school choice. They're still public schools.
Right.
So they're a school choice and a different kind of public school. So we support all forms of school choice. We support anything that adds competition and accountability into the current school system. Our Bright Today scholarship program is a very different math from the charter schools. Charter schools, I can see their point, where I can see how it can harm the district budgets. We present a very different math.
Well, the charter schools are follow the student funding
all
formulas.
the money, roughly $15,000, all $15,000, state or local, follows the students to the charter school. With our scholarship program, only a portion of the state money follows the student to the private school of their choice. All the local money stays. So basically, instead of $15,000 following the student, only a maximum of $6,000 would under this legislation. And the districts get to keep the other $9,000.
And you want to give people the money directly. You want to give parents the money directly, correct?
Sort of. It's like a health savings account. It's like a SNAP card. The money gets deposited quarterly into a debit card account that they can only spend for education. It's controlled by the parents. So we're not giving the parents money. We're putting the money into a special account.
And there's no chance for abuse of those funds?
There's always chance for abuse of funds in any public program.
Right.
But there's safeguards put in the bill. It says you can either be disqualified from the program or you can be reported to the Attorney General for fraud if you blatantly spend it on other means.
All right, so you want to give families their own, at least proportional voucher to spend it the way they want, to send them to schools like Lewis went to.
Right.
Your parents would have benefited from that.
Absolutely. Actually, the private school that I went to was only $3,000 a year. And this sort of program would allow for private tutoring and things like that outside of just school tuition. Pay for books, pay for college in the future. You can save that money towards things like that. And you know, my family benefited from it, but some of my cousins weren't able to. And you know, there's a real contrast to what this sort of thing allows. I was able to go through the private school system because my mother and father sacrificed really hard to get me there. Some of my cousins weren't. One of my cousins, he's actually, he's now in the ACI. He wasn't challenged in school. He didn't feel that it was meeting his needs, and his parents didn't feel that way. And you know, he dropped out. He got in with the wrong people, and you know, this issue is really everything for me. It's, you know, it can be URI or the ACI for a lot of people, and being that that's, you know, something really close to my heart, this is why I'm here, you know, fighting for it.
All right, when we come back, we'll show you some tables that you can take a look at where Mike's story and legislation proposal becomes more clear. Stay with us. All right, I'm going to put some stuff up on the screen for you to follow along. It's part of the report and the proposed legislation that Mike Stenhouse's Center for Freedom and Prosperity are selling to us as part of this program called what again?
The Bright Today Scholarship Program.
All right, school operating revenues and costs. This is a tougher graph of all that you have. You got some simpler graphs for us. But what does this tell us?
Basically, it says the relationship between student enrollment and variable incremental costs is not a straight line. You don't, you know, if you lose one student, you don't necessarily save the cost of a classroom. It's stepped. So you have to, if you look at one of the red horizontal lines, you know, you'd have to lose a certain amount of enrollment before you could actually save money if enrollment goes down. But in the long term, what it shows is that the expenses of educating students tends to follow enrollment. It just doesn't do it in a straight line process like the green line. It's a stepped process. So opponents will tell you, well, if we lose one or two students, we're not necessarily going to save costs. And we agree, because it's stepped. But in the long term, if you lose in 50, 100, 200 students, you are going to save costs.
You're saving costs in your district if you lose a boatload of kids out of the district because you're going to get compensated by the state for those kids who have left. That's what you're saying.
That's right.
All right. Issue number two here, or information number two. Impact of Bright Today scholarships on public school finances. Quick explanation.
Yeah, so the two charts on the left, first of all. So every district receives funding in the green, some combination of state funding, federal funding, and local funding, and then expenses match that. Afterwards, with the scholarship, you see at the very top a small slice of the revenue from the state you don't get anymore, right? That's that green arrow down. But you also don't have to educate those kids. So there are cost savings like the prior chart showed. So in theory and in practice, if the cost savings exceed the revenue losses, the districts will actually save money. And there's national research, you know, that proves this over and over again. We're just trying, you know, this research looks at those same kinds of mechanics nationally. So I know it's complex, but it's
all
true.
Right, you're doing it right. Next slide. This is interesting. 22% of Rhode Island students are already opting for educational choice, albeit in charter schools and intra school choice, even though there's no busing for it. 68% of Rhode Island students would make a choice. I'm confused by this because while I believe those numbers on that screen, you actually project that only 2 or 3% of the students are actually going to make choices outside of the school district.
Right, there's a process you have to go through. Not every family will follow the paperwork and do all the administrative things necessary to apply for and keep getting a grant. And there's a public education, not everybody will aware of it. But when they're polled, which that graphic showed, most people say, in Rhode Island anyway, that my first choice would not be to go to a public school, much like Lewis's family and Ray Hull's family. But most families, so while they want to go to someplace better, they don't have the means to, or they don't know that there's something available to them. So that all becomes part of the public education.
But that 2 or 3% projection, is that important to the entire framework? Seems to me it is.
Oh yeah, because
well, what if more people want to do it? You'll drain the whole system.
Well, there's a supply and demand issue too. There's only so many seats available in private schools in Rhode Island right now. And historically, again, if you look at national studies, even some of the most aggressive voucher programs that have been going on for years and years rarely exceed 3% participation rate.
It's a very strange number. That's a psychological exercise. Is there one more graphic? Is that? And this is a good one. I believe that. I don't think it's a partisan issue.
It's not. Yeah.
Yeah. Thought on that, Lewis?
No, I agree. My whole family has voted Democratic for a long time. I ran as an independent, and I truly believe that it's really just a uniting issue.
All right. So to sum, where are you going with this legislation? Are you out there with another fancy, cool report that no one will pay attention to, or you got some traction here?
Well, we did put a report out. Let me say this, just technically, it's important to know. Yesterday, bipartisan legislation in both the House and the Senate, with lead Democrat sponsors on both, proving that it's not a partisan issue, were submitted. There is a House bill, 5970. The Senate bill will get a number on that soon. So that's a major step to have such significant legislation in a bipartisan fashion in the state.
Because if there are less kids to teach, the only way you save the money is by letting teachers go. You know that.
But there's also teaching opportunities increased on the private side.
Yes, but it's not.
Labor doesn't care about that.
It's not easy, right?
Well, somehow, if there's more kids in private schools, they're going to have to hire teachers.
Right. Well, we'll continue the dialogue. People should watch for the progress of this bill. How and when, real quick?
Well, I don't know. Hearings haven't been scheduled yet, so stay tuned for those. We expect that we'll have some hearings in April.
All right. Thanks for the report,
Thanks,
Mike.
Dan.
Nice to meet you, Lewis.
Very nice to meet
Good
you.
luck in your next election.
Thank you.
I hear there's a seat going to be open. Final thought when we come back to it. All righty. Final thing. Tomorrow night, we've got a debate on whether it ought to be legal to lay across a highway out of protest. The senator who says it ought to be a felony, well, no one says it ought to be legal. How much would the penalty be? The senator says a felony, and an apologist says it shouldn't harm you for the rest of your life on your record. That's tomorrow night, and I'll see you on the radio at noon on WPRO.